Have you ever
Where are
wondered
you
how
going,
far a
little
creature
one?
will go just to protect
That's it.
its
Follow your
young?
curiosity.
What happens when survival
You're braver
and
than I
instinct
thought.
collide? And is
More
every
than just
egg meant
instinct.
to become life?
Go on, show
Or
the
are
world
some
what you're made
stories
of.
destined to remain incomplete? Welcome back, where we bring you the hidden, emotional truths of the wild. If you enjoy real and powerful wildlife stories, make sure you stay with us. Because every story here shows you something you've never seen before. This is the story of a quiet but powerful pair, bound together over years, returning once again with a new hope for life. The forest had woken slowly that year. Frost still clung to the lower branches each morning, and the river ran thin and cold between banks of last season's fallen leaves. But the pair did not wait for perfection. They had never waited. Years together had taught them that the forest gives no promises, only moments. And so they began. She was the older of the two, her feathers darker along the edges, worn smooth by weather and wind. He was younger, faster, still carrying the restlessness of a male who had not yet seen his first decade. But they moved together like two halves of the same breath. When she turned her head, he watched. When he called out, she answered. They searched carefully, moving from place to place, testing branches, checking sight lines, measuring the depth of hollows. Other pairs had already chosen, some higher, some closer to water, but she was particular. Too high and the wind would rock the nest during storms. Too low and the climbing predators would find them before the chicks could fly.
Choo-choo,
She remembered. She always remembered. Finally she found it. An old oak standing apart from the others, its trunk thick with bark scarred by lightning years ago.
Choo-choo, just us
A fork in the upper third of the tree, broad and stable, hidden from below by a curtain of leaves that would not fall until autumn.
It's okay to be alone.
He circled it twice,
She
then
turned
landed
the
beside
silent
her.
egg every day.
Together they began to build. The work took days. He brought sticks, twigs,
Every
strips of
single
bark pulled
day.
from fallen limbs. She wove
She
them
turned
into place,
the silent
turning her
egg
body
every
again
day.
and again to shape the bowl of the nest. Then came the softer things, moss, dry
Every
grass,
single day.
feathers she plucked from her own chest. By the end of the first week, the nest held shape. By the end of the second, it held warmth, and soon after, 2 eggs were laid, small, pale, fragile beyond measure.
It's mine!
She settled over them immediately,
No, I had
her
it
body
first.
lowering with a care
Hey,
that seemed almost
What is
deliberate,
going on here?
almost
All
human in
right,
its
that's
tenderness.
enough. Let's share.
He watched from a nearby branch, then flew off to find food. That was the agreement. She would guard, he would gather, and between them, life would have its chance. But nature doesn't always follow our expectations. Time passed. Days folded into nights, nights back into days. The forest changed around them, new leaves, louder insects, the first real heat of late spring pressing down through the canopy. She sat, he brought food. She ate quickly, never leaving the eggs uncovered for more than a moment. Her body knew the temperature they needed. Her instincts knew the rhythm of turning, of shifting weight, of listening, because she did listen. Every day, several times a day, she would lower her head close to the eggs and wait. There is a sound that parent birds learn to hear, a faint tapping, a vibration more than a noise, the first whisper of a beak trying to break through shell. She waited for that sound, and only one of those eggs showed signs of life. The other remained silent. Day after day, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature, she turned it anyway. She warmed it anyway. She spoke to it in the soft, clicking language of her kind, the same way she spoke to the other. But the other answered. The second egg never did, still she did not abandon it. A single fragile chick entering the world alone. The hatching took nearly an entire day. A small crack appeared first, no longer than a fingernail. Then another, crossing the first. Then a piece of shell fell away, and inside a dark eye blinked at the light. She leaned down and breathed warm air over the opening, encouraging, waiting. He arrived with food and found her still leaning, still waiting, and he understood. He dropped the prey at the edge of the nest and flew off again. By evening, the chick had freed itself, wet, shivering, barely able to lift its head, but alive. She pulled the broken shell pieces away and tucked the tiny body beneath her breast. And there, in that warmth, the chick slept its first sleep. And yet, despite everything, it began to grow quickly. Food was never a problem. The father worked tirelessly, bringing in prey again and again, small rodents, insects, an occasional lizard snatched from a sunlit rock. More than enough to support the young life. The nest began to fill with leftovers, bones and fur piling up along the edges like offerings at a shrine. But something unusual started to happen. At times, curiosity took over instinct. There were moments where the eggs were moved, disturbed, almost as if something didn't feel right. She would shift the unhatched egg from one side of the nest to the other, rolling it with her beak, then stopping to listen. Still nothing. Sometimes she would cover it with grass, then uncover it again minutes later. Once, she lifted it completely out of the nest and held it at the edge, looking down at the ground far below. Then she pulled it back. She knew. Some part of her had to know, but knowing and accepting are not the same thing. Still, the mother remained alert, careful, experienced, always returning just in time to restore order. The days passed. The chick grew fast, faster than either parent had expected. Its downy feathers thickened. Its legs, thin as twigs, began to hold its weight for seconds at a time. It opened its mouth wide whenever the father appeared, and he filled that mouth until the chick staggered backward, too full to stand. And then, finally, a quiet moment that changed everything. The chick had grown strong enough to leave the warmth of her body during the day. It sat in the sun, blinking at the sky, learning the shapes of leaves and clouds and shadows. She sat beside it, watching not the sky but the forest around them. Always watching. At one point, danger came unexpectedly. A young predator got too close. It was a snake, thin and green, moving along a branch that touched the edge of the oak. Not large enough to take the mother, but large enough to take a chick still too weak to run. It moved slowly, tasting the air, following the scent of warmth and helplessness. But in that moment, the mother transformed. She did not cry out. She did not flee. Instead, she stepped between the snake and the chick. Her wings spread wide, making her body look twice its real size. Her feathers rose along her neck. Her beak opened, and from her throat came a sound unlike anything before, a low, vibrating hiss that belonged more to a snake than to a bird. The young predator hesitated. It had never seen anything like this. A meal that fought back before the fight had even begun. She took one step forward, then another. The snake retreated. Slowly at first, then faster, sliding back along the branch and disappearing into the leaves. It worked. The threat backed away. She stood there for a long time, wings still spread, breath quick and shallow. Then she folded herself back down and pulled the chick close. It did not understand what had happened, but it understood warmth. It understood safety, and it pressed itself against her chest and stayed there until the sun began to lower. From that point on, everything changed. The father now understood. There was a life to protect. Not just an egg, not just an idea. A small, breathing, hungry creature that looked at him with dark eyes and opened its mouth when he appeared. Something had shifted in him. He no longer hunted for instinct alone. He hunted for this, and his effort doubled. Food piled up around the nest, so much that sometimes it was more than they could even eat. Prey lay untouched along the rim. Half-eaten beetles, a shrew no one wanted, parts of things that had once been whole. The father landed again and again, each time with something new, until the nest began to smell of rot as well as life. The mother pushed the old food over the edge when she could. But there was so much. As the days passed, the chick grew stronger. Its eyes opened fully, bright and aware. It followed movement now, the flick of a tail, the drop of a shadow, the arrival of a parent with food. Its wings stretched, first in sleep, then deliberately, testing the air. Small feathers began to push through the down, dark at the tips, still soft but growing harder every morning.
A mother bird
And soon,
tends to her nest,
it
but
was
this
no
egg
longer
will
just
never
surviving.
hatch.
It was
Day
learning,
after day, she
learning to
refuses
eat
to
on
leave,
its own.
driven by instinct.
The father would drop prey
Until,
in front
at
of it and
last,
step
she
back,
must fly on.
waiting.
Where are you
The
going,
chick would
little
peck
one?
at the food, miss, peck
That's
again.
it. Follow your curiosity.
Sometimes it took a dozen tries.
You're braver than I
but
thought.
it learned.
More than
Learning
just
to stand
instinct.
for longer
Go on,
periods,
show the world what you're
balancing
made
with
of.
wings half open, falling, getting up again. Learning to exist in a world that had given it only one chance, but not everything was perfect. The second egg never
One
hatched.
egg lived.
Weeks had passed.
One egg did
The egg
not.
should have broken open long ago,
The mother cared
but
for
it remained
both
there,
anyway.
smooth and pale and utterly still. A quiet monument to something that never began, and still. The mother continued to care for it. She turned it sometimes. She sat on it during cold nights, though the chick no longer needed her warmth the same way. She spoke to it, the same soft clicks she used for the living chick. As if hoping something might still happen, the living chick did not understand the egg. It would peck at the shell sometimes, curious, then lose interest and return to the real food scattered around the nest. It had no sibling, no rival for food, no one to push against or learn from. Just the two adults coming and going, and the silent egg that never moved. Meanwhile, the young one adapted. Without siblings, it spent its days alone. The
Growing
mother
up
had begun to
without
leave the
siblings
nest more
means
often
learning to be
now,
alone.
stretching her wings, preening, watching the forest from higher branches.
Choo-choo, just
She
us
always
today.
returned. But the
Why
chick
am I always
learned to be
alone?
by itself, eating,
I guess I'm
resting,
used to it.
exploring the edges of the nest
okay
with
to be
careful
alone.
steps, looking down at the
Choo-choo,
ground
just
far
us
below
today.
without fear, because
Why
it
am I
had
always
not
alone?
yet learned what falling meant,
I guess I'm
growing
used to
faster
it.
than expected. Its
It's okay to
plumage
be
changed
alone.
almost daily.
She turned the
The down
silent egg
disappeared,
every
replaced
day.
by real feathers, brown and white, and the first hints of adult color. Its
Every
beak hardened.
single day.
Its legs thickened. It looked less
She
like a
turned the
baby
silent
and more
egg
like a
every
young
day.
bird every sunrise. Eventually, a shift happened. The mother began to focus on
Every
something
single
else,
day.
preparing for another chance, another beginning. She spent more time away from the nest now, sometimes an hour, sometimes half a morning. When she returned, she carried new sticks, fresh grass, the beginning of something that was not for this chick, but for the next.
Hey,
Her body was
what is
telling
going
her
on
something,
here?
that the
All right,
season was
that's
not
enough.
over,
Let's
that
share.
another pair of eggs was still possible, that survival meant never stopping, which meant the responsibility now fell entirely on the father, and he didn't fail. He arrived with food before the chick called for it. He perched on the edge of the nest during the long afternoons, watching the sky, watching the ground, watching his young one explore. When a crow flew too close, he launched himself into the air and chased it until both birds disappeared beyond the trees. He came back breathless but satisfied. The nest was safe, but hunger, instinct, survival sometimes blur the lines. There were moments of tension, moments where even the bond between parent and chick was tested. Once the father returned with a mouse still twitching. The chick was hungry. It was always hungry now, and it lunged forward. But the father pulled the food back. He held it just out of reach, then dropped it, then picked it up again. Teaching or something else? Harder to watch was the way he sometimes looked at the chick, not with tenderness but with assessment. As if measuring, as if calculating how much food this creature would need before it finally left. The chick learned to hold its ground. When the father teased with food, the chick did not back down. It pushed forward, beak open, wings half raised. It made itself look bigger too, just as the mother had done against the snake. And slowly the father relented. He dropped the food and stepped back. The bond held. But it had been tested, and then, one night, everything changed again. It reached the edge, and for the first time, looked out into the world beyond. The chick had climbed onto the highest rim of the nest. Below, the forest spread out like a green ocean, branches and leaves and shadows shifting in the evening wind. It could see the river now, a thin silver thread in the distance. It could see the tops of other trees, other nests, other birds coming home to roost. A world it had never seen. A world full of danger, but also freedom. It stood there for a long time. The mother was away. The father was hunting. For a few minutes, the chick was completely alone at the edge of everything it had ever known. Its wings twitched, it leaned forward, then it stepped back. Not yet. But soon, days later, with growing strength and restless energy, it made the leap. No warning, no hesitation. One moment it was standing on the rim, wings half open. The next moment it was falling, its first flight, not perfect, not graceful. The wings flapped too fast, then too slow, then too fast again. The chick dropped toward the ground, caught itself, rose 10 feet, dropped again. A branch whipped past its head. Leaves brushed its body. For one terrible second it thought it would hit the ground. But enough. Enough to leave the nest behind. It landed on a low branch of a neighboring tree, legs buckling, chest heaving. It sat there, blinking, feathers ruffled, not quite believing what had just happened. Then it looked up. The mother was watching from the oak. She had seen everything. She made a sound, soft, low, almost approving. Then she turned away. Even then, it wasn't truly alone. It returned. That same evening, it climbed back up through the branches, struggling, falling, trying again. It reached the nest as the sun was setting, calling out, still dependent, still learning. The father was there with food, and the chick ate ravenously, exhausted but alive. But something had shifted. It was no longer just a chick. It was becoming something more. The next day, it did not stay in the nest. It flew to a different branch, then another. It explored the oak from bottom to top, finding hollows and hiding places it had never seen from above. It found insects crawling along the bark and ate them without waiting for a parent. It discovered the taste of a certain berry, the feel of rain on open feathers, the way the wind could lift you if you let it. And as it explored further, finding new places, new encounters, its journey truly began. One morning it flew farther than ever before, across the clearing, past the river, to a grove of trees it had only glimpsed from the nest. There were other young birds there, strangers but familiar. They looked at each other. They called out. They did not attack. And for the first time, the chick understood that the world was larger than its parents, larger than the oak, larger than anything it had known. Not every story ends with perfection. Not every egg hatches. The second egg remained in the nest for a long time after the chick had left. The mother finally pushed it over the edge one morning, a quiet, final act. It fell through the branches, struck a root at the base of the oak, and broke open. Empty, hollow, a shell with nothing inside. She did not watch it fall. She had already turned away, already begun building again, already preparing for the next pair of eggs that would come before the summer ended. That was her way. That was the way of the wild. But sometimes, all it takes is one life, one chance, one survival. The young bird did not know about the broken egg. It did not know that it had begun alone, grown alone, learned to fly alone. It only knew the wind under its wings, and the sky above the trees, and the hunger that pushed it forward each morning. Weeks later, when the parents began preparing for a second brood, the young bird no longer returned to the nest. It had found its own perches, its own feeding grounds, its own place in the forest. The mother looked for it once, scanning the nearby branches, listening for a familiar call. She did not find it. After a few minutes, she stopped looking. That is not sadness. That is not coldness. That is survival. The wild does not mourn what leaves. It celebrates what stays. And what stays is the memory of feathers pressed against feathers on cold nights, of food dropped into an open mouth, of wings spread wide against a predator that came too close. The young bird lives. Somewhere in that forest right now, it is hunting or resting or watching the sky. It does not remember the egg that never hatched. It does not remember the danger or the hunger or the long days alone in the nest. It only remembers how to fly, and that is what makes the wild so powerful.
But this egg will
If you
never
enjoyed
hatch.
this story,
Day after
stay
day,
with
she
us,
refuses
because
to
the
leave,
wild
driven
always
by
has
instinct.
another story to tell.
Until, at
There is
last,
always another
she must
nest
fly
being
on.
built, another egg
Where are you
being
going,
born,
little one?
another chick taking
That's it,
its
follow
first
your
uncertain
curiosity.
leap into a world
You're
that does
braver
not
than I
promise
thought.
safety,
More
but
than just
offers something
instinct.
rarer.
Go on, show the
A
world what you're
chance.
made of.
Just one chance, and for those who take it, that is enough. The forest continues. The seasons turn. The parents will raise more young, lose some, save
One egg
others,
lived.
and never once ask why.
One egg did not.
And somewhere,
The
in
mother
a tree
cared
you
for
will
both
never
anyway.
see, a small bird opens its wings and flies toward a horizon it cannot yet name.